Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm honored today to have Harvey Wasserman, also known as Sluggo. He's an American journalist, author, democracy activist, and advocate for renewable energy. He has been a strategist and organizer in the anti-nuclear movement in the United States since 1973 and in the election protection movement since 2004. Harvey, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today, my dear brother?
An honor to be with you, Egberto. You're great.
Well, anyway, my friend, first of all, how are you doing with the fires? I understand you are between two major fires.
Yes, about a mile and a half from the Palisades fire and about 3 miles from the Eaton fire, both of which are threatening. I never thought I'd say this, but thank goodness for the 405, this massive freeway has actually been serving as a fire break, which has protected us, actually. But we have been in danger. It's been a very hair-raising week, but so far we're okay.
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to talk today, it has to do with a nuclear plant in that vicinity in your area. Tell me a little bit about that.
The Diablo Canyon atomic reactors are 40 plus years old. They're about 4 hours north of here. There was a deal signed in 2018 to shut them down. And Gavin Newsom signed that deal, but in 2022, he rescinded it. And as a result, the entire Los Angeles region is in danger of a major radiation release, as happened at Chernobyl and at Fukushima. And so, the unpreparedness that people are talking about in this situation with these fires is multiplied 1,000 times by the unpreparedness for dealing with a radioactive cloud coming down from San Luis Obispo. So nobody wants to talk about it. But Egberto, you're the only one brave enough to have me on and to deal with this issue. We do not need the power from those reactors. They are expensive. They are surrounded by earthquake faults. They're embrittled. They need to shut. And as I say, a phase-out plan was adopted in 2018, but the governor, Gavin Newsom, has reneged on it. We need to shut those reactors. I want to say also, Egberto, it's now indicating being indicated from various sources that at least one of the fires here in LA may have been caused by power lines from Southern California Edison. And this is reminiscent of the fires in Northern California in 2018 that burned so much forest land and that wiped out the town of Paradise, among others, and killed 80 people. So what we're seeing here may be deja vu all over again, from power lines, from central generators that are not manageable. And we need a new paradigm here. If these houses in LA had been covered with solar panels, as we've been advocating for so many years, and had microgrids instead of large utility grids, these fires would not have happened. I can guarantee you right now, if these houses had been solarized, if there was a microgrids in place, LA would not have burned.
And, you know what? A few Politics Done Rights ago, I started to mention about how homes are built here, etc., not having metal roofs, not having solar roofs, etc., which are inherently protection against all these embers that are falling on roofs and causing fires. One of the things that I think at issue here with you is, they never did what was necessary to rebuild up in to build correctly or rebuild correctly in Northern California. One of your expectations is as they rebuild here in Southern California, that they pass rules or they pass laws and policies to not only talk about microgrids where we're not dependent on lines that go through the forest, but areas that can generate power locally, correct?
Absolutely. It's 100% right. Our electric bills would disappear, basically, and the danger to the public would disappear. We could control our own power. And that's the issue, because the utility companies don't want to give up their control of our power supply, and the politicians don't want to talk about it. And what Gavin Newsom did to us at that Diablo Canyon is a stab in the back. And, we have seen that these reactors can blow up. And we have also seen that these microgrids with solar panels can completely change the paradigm and give us the kind of cheap, renewable, clean, reliable energy, that we have to have. I mean, this whole argument, well, solar is no good because the sun goes down at night, it's now been done away with because of the huge improvements in battery technologies. We're on the brink of switching from lithium to sodium in terms of housing batteries, which is an order of magnitude cheaper. And we have the reliability, we have the technology, and they don't want to hear about it. It's mind-boggling to me.
Actually, let me just say, it's not mind-boggling at all, really, my friend. What happens is that when you're under an oligarchy and folks want to amortize all that they've spent already, and folks want to ensure that they can maintain their power. This is what happens. What's best for Americans are not necessarily what's best for corporations.
Right, and I love, by the way, how Trump is yelling at windmills when the number one source of electricity from renewable sources in Texas is the huge numbers of windmills and wind turbines in Texas. You get a very substantial percentage of your electricity in Texas from wind turbines, and in fact, the old thing they said about nuclear power is going to be too cheap to meter. In fact, wind power in Texas is too cheap to meter. At night in West Texas, the utility companies give away electricity because there's so much coming in from the wind turbines.
It's cheaper to actually throw the signal on the line than to turn the turbines and shut them down, etc. For having excessive power. Absolutely.
So you can watch TV and charge your computer and do your wash, all that stuff at night in West Texas for free because of the wind power. And the same with renewables. Solar panels have plummeted in price and continued. It's exactly the opposite of nuclear. Nuclear keeps going up and renewables keep going down, and they don't want to hear about it here. Not the Democrats, not the Republicans, certainly not the utility industry, certainly not Gavin Newsom. If they're going to rebuild Los Angeles, every building that's put back up in Los Angeles needs to have solar panels on it. And we need to have microgrids, and they don't want to hear about it because the corporate power, as you say, is too vested in central generated fossil nuclear electricity.
Well, let me tell you, coming on to programs like this is what we have to do, not just this time, but it has to be done over and over, program over program, etc. It's not going to be done by those who are advertising fossil fuel. It's not going to be done by those who are being paid for by the utility companies. It's going to be done by people like you, Harvey Wasserman. So you keep up doing the important work that you're doing. So give me a closer.
Well, listen, we have got to rebuild Los Angeles totally solar. The Olympics are coming in 28. We want Los Angeles totally solarized by the coming of the Olympics. These fires would not have happened if we had solar panels on the roofs and microgrids carrying our electricity. We're now seeing that Edison here repeated the horrible history of PG&E in Northern California when they burned down the forest, killed 80 people, and burned those towns. We've seen it again now in Los Angeles. How much more do we have to see, Egberto, before we use the technology that we have to give us cheap or even free electricity and save our planet?
Harvey Wasserman, a.k.a. Sluggo, an American journalist, author, democracy activist, and advocate for renewable energy. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you.
Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. My name is Exec Willis, your host. Today we are honored to have Jamie Miller. Who's Jamie Miller? Jamie Miller is a seasoned political consultant and former executive director of the Republican Party of Florida. Yeah, that Florida. And he's been engaged with thousands of politicians, so he knows his territory very well. One of the reasons I wanted to have Jamie is, as you guys know, what we believe in here. You have to have that dialogue, and people must be aware of where people stands, where their true beliefs are, what they intend to do for you, or what I always say as well, to you. Jamie, thank you so kindly for being here at Politics and Right.
That's my pleasure. I look forward to the discussion.
Hey, first of all, you know where I got to start. I have to start at today is, and by the way, you pick the date, not me. Today's January 6th. Make your case.
I don't know what case you're asking me to make. I have been on record, saying that, I think the Department of Justice, for the most part, has done a good job of trying to separate people who were accidental tourists and those who showed up to the Capitol in Kevlar vests and Kevlar helmets and maybe not intending to do good things. And so I think that was very small. I think the broader issue, and I think maybe not even my stance, but I think a lot of people on the right have a legitimate gripe when they look at January 6 protesters and the amount of money, time, and effort the federal government put into finding them, prosecuting them, and putting and having them in jail, some without much of a chance to face their accusers. And then you compare that to the more than 5,000 Black Lives Matter protests, of which 10%, and that's the kind of the mainstream media's claim, is like only 10% of Black Lives Matter protests were turned violent. Well, that was more than 500 protests that turned violent. And to be violent, people either, were arrested, buildings were damaged, on fire, or individuals were hurt. And so at one point during Black Lives Matter, which, spanned a couple of weeks, not just one day for 4 or 5 hours, we had about 100 American cities simultaneously on fire. And so I think the criticism is that, and I don't know that it's wrong that January 6 protesters had this hard look at them, and if they need to be in jail, they should be in jail. I've said on conservative shows that if you were inside the Capitol that day, it was a secure building and you knew you had to go through metal detectors to get in that building. So if you didn't go through a metal detector, you knew you didn't belong there. So, what were there FBI assets on the ground? Yes, that's, one of the huge conspiracy theories that proved to be correct. I mean, the FBI came out within the last few weeks and said that there were 30 assets on the ground in that crowd. And so now who were they and what did they instigate? Who knows? And I don't want to play all the way into conspiracy theories, but I think where the right has a legitimate concern is it seems as though that January 6 protesters were not treated equally under the law when you compare it to the Black Lives Matter protests, that the ones that turned violent.
Notice that I didn't interrupt you and I made you go ahead and present the case as you did. First of all, I do want to start with the FBI assets. The FBI assets that you speak about it's really a non-issue. There would have always been FBI assets all over the Capitol. They were not there doing special things or anything of the sort. And there is no document, I repeat, no document that gives the implication that somehow we had FBI agents that were pulling the strings. So
I didn't suggest it was agents.
I know.
I said there were assets.
Right, and that's fine.
And I do think you're wrong about one thing.
No interruptions. I didn't interrupt you. Remember?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So there were no FBI assets per se, other than a lot of fiction that came about. But secondly, I think it's a false equivalence to equate Black Lives Matter, which, by the way, I do support, and I'll tell you why I support Black Lives Matter, and the insurrection. By definition, what you saw the insurrectionists do was a terrorist attack on the United States. Define the word terrorism, and you see that what they attempted to do was to change politically what had occurred or what was about to occur. Those insurrectionists qualified as terrorists. I consider that whereas you say the State Department, or not the State Department, the Department of Justice did a good job, I think they did a horrendous job. I think they should have locked up Donald Trump immediately as the person who instigated an insurrection against the United States, a potential coup. And I also think not only should they have locked him up, but they should have gotten all those folks that they could have rounded up with AK-47s and all the guns that they had. Every single one of those people should have been arrested on the spot. And that wasn't done. If those were Black Lives Matter people with AK-47s, AR-15s, etc., they wouldn't have seen the day of light. And I'm speaking as a person who understands, as a person of color who knows that there are two different justice systems here. I don't play the card, but there are two different justice systems. You could not have had BLM folks with AR-15s, with AK-47s, walking the streets of DC and not been arrested or shot. The next thing that you brought up that I think is very important is that, in the false equivalence between the January 6th as well as with the terrorist attack, the insurrection, the coup, here's the difference. How many people died in the BLM attacks? Guess what? The people that died in the BLM attacks were from right-wingers who killed protesters. We had that young man who became the hero for killing two guys. The hero from Wisconsin, I can't remember his name right now. He assassinated two guys who were protesting and claimed he feared for his life. Two guys. Everybody that got killed in the BLM protests that you were complaining about, guess what? They were protesters getting killed. In the case of January 6th, it was police officers who got killed. There was one protester that got killed trying to broke into the Congress. No more, no less. So, I mean, I think it's a false equivalence, but please respond, my dear brother.
No, and I appreciate your comments, and I apologize for interrupting. You and I are going to disagree. I always say there's 360 degrees.
Yes. There's
360 degrees of viewing an elephant, and one of us is looking at the trunk and the other the tail. So, I think what I said was that, people on the right feel like there were different levels of justice. Like you said, you have felt as an African-American man.
As a black man.
Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Don't mean to offend.
Yeah. No offense. It's just that there are different meanings. Yeah.
Okay. So they don't, So I just don't think that where some folks are looking at, like, nobody got arrested in Black Lives Matter. Very few people got arrested compared to the number of people who the government sought out to arrest. Like you said, everybody who was involved should have been arrested at that point. Well, I disagree with that, and I would disagree. And I never said, I would disagree if somebody came and said, hey, at some place where there was a Black Lives Matter protest and now there's 3 buildings on fire, we should immediately arrest everyone. I would disagree with that as well. So, just to say, carte blanche, because people were there, they should have been arrested, I think is not the way to handle any type of protest. And while you categorize this as a treasonous or, that's not the word you used, but insurrection, this started out as a protest and somewhere it went haywire. And I don't think that 90% of the people there meant for it to go haywire, and we can get into, I don't know that we need to, because I just think we're going to disagree on the number of people who are protecting the Capitol during Black Lives Matter versus the number of people who are protecting the Capitol that day. That was a problem. And how people, we have these videos of, on one side, there's videos of, not Capitol Police, but mostly DC police who are wearing body cams, who are struggling with protesters mostly outside, and then Capitol Police and people walking through the Capitol. Right. And now they did some stupid things. They sat at Nancy Pelosi's desk. They carried her lectern around. They made life-changing, quite frankly, some of those folks made life-changing decisions to be accidental tourists. Right. And I know the one person who was seen, smiling and kind of making a wave as he was carrying Nancy Pelosi's lectern lives near Tampa, Florida. And so that case has received a lot of press here. And, him doing that has destroyed his life for the most part. I mean, I don't even think he ended up doing that much time. I think it was kind of a time served thing. But as far as his profession, his family, I think if he had that day to go back, and he wasn't accused of doing anything violent. It was stupid. It was
he broke into her place, right?
Well, I don't know that he broke in. My understanding was that this lectern was kind of held in kind of a secret staircase, right? But who cares, right? We can get into particulars and argue about that. I don't know that helps either one of us or helps your show. But the truth of the matter is, and I agreed to this at the beginning, I would assume that nearly everyone in that crowd knew that that's, number one, a secure building. Number two, you walk through metal detectors to get into it. And if you didn't do those two things, you didn't belong there. Or that you have a badge that allows you there, right? And so, so even the accidental tourist, if you want to call some of these folks that, and I think there are some of those folks who ended up being that, they weren't at the front end of breaking a window or breaking a door. And when the police stood aside and stood down or whatever, they're letting us in. All right. Well, now they're, but they knew they didn't belong there. And I'll agree to that. But what do we round them all up and, put them in prison for years?
No,
for that?
I think the Justice Department did the least that they could do. And notice I said the least that they could do. I would have rounded up a lot more than what's rounded up. Of course, I would have done a lot more because I saw on TV. I saw a lot more than 1,000 violent people breaking windows and terrorizing the building with my own eyes. And by the way, you are right that BLM had a lot of property destruction, etc. BLM was a riot, and you're correct. It was a riot, and there are some people, in fact, here in Houston, a lot of folks went to jail as they did the BLM riots here. And I've always said, when I protest with the knowledge that I may be arrested and I would pay the price for whatever wrong that I did. What I find too often on the right is many on the right, I'm not talking about you now, but many on the right want to be exempted. They think they have free will to do things without penalty. Now they expect to get a pardon from Donald Trump after having done wrong. But I think that's enough on January 6th. Let's talk some other issues. I brought that up because it's January 6th and, all of that. But let me ask you.
It's a great way to get warmed up.
It's a great way to get warmed up. But just let me say, my dear brother, I think a lot of times, yes, we look through the lens of our ideologies a lot of times, but there are certain things I feel should be considered absolute. And I think if we had a reversal, for a long time, the right has tried to claim the mantra of the flag and the rule of law and all these other issues. And it turns out that the one time it was supposed to be practiced, they allowed somebody like a Donald Trump, somebody that I have no respect for at all. I'm sorry, but my president is now a convicted felon. My president is now, in my opinion, a very evil person that has harmed a lot of people. But that's beside the point. Let's talk policy. You're a Republican out of Florida. And DeSantis has been the governor. He won by, I think, the largest percentage of votes in modern history. Yeah. In modern history, right? So he's a very well-liked governor in Florida. And let me tell you something interesting. I have listeners that are Republicans of my program, and a Florida resident just wrote me and said, I am a registered Republican. She wants to let me know she's a registered Republican who also voted for DeSantis, would never vote for Trump, would never vote for many of her Republican Party folks because of where Trump has taken them, why she has taken solace with Democrats. But as she said, she's a Republican and she wants me to know she's a Republican. What are your thoughts on what kind of Republican are you?
I think both parties are struggling with their identity. To specifically answer your question, I consider myself, for lack of a better term, a legacy Republican. You can probably see behind me a picture of Ronald Reagan. I've got a picture of me and Donald Trump. So I've been involved with Republican politics a very long time. And Donald Trump has 4 years as president, and then there will be other Democrat and Republican presidents after him. So I've been a Republican prior to Donald Trump. I'll be Donald Trump's presidency, I'll be a Republican, likely Republican after his presidency. So that's who I consider myself. And I think there's a lot of people, I hear what your listener says, and I don't disagree with it. Donald Trump.
You don't.
Donald Trump won the presidency in a major way, but again, you could look at it if you want to look at it from half glass full or whatever. He again didn't have that many coattails. Yes, Ohio, Pennsylvania, U.S. Senate, but
that's it, pretty much. Yeah,
that was it, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the congressional seats, Republicans lost congressional seats while the president won. That's abnormal, right? That's not normally the case. And there were probably at least 3 other Senate seats. Arizona, you could argue that the candidate was bad there. Nevada, that was a winnable race. Mm-hmm. Michigan, winnable race. So at least those other 2 were winnable races. I don't have them all in front of me or memorized, but certainly Wisconsin, winnable race. So it's a... So I hear where, certainly there were a lot of people who went and voted for Donald Trump who either then did not vote for U.S. Senate in these pivotal races, mm-hmm. or voted for the Democrat.
Right. And it's interesting. I mean, I know it's a touchy subject, but I am first of all, I am surprised that Kamala didn't win because, again, I was looking at the race through colored glasses. I was wrong. I thought it was going to be a landslide because I thought women would really come out and finally say we can't have somebody like Donald Trump who thinks of women the way he thinks of women, who does to women what he does to women, and still vote for the guy. I was wrong. And I tell you what's interesting. And I said this on my KPFT 90.1 show this morning. We had callers that kind of it said, everybody wants to talk about it's a working class issue. It's an issue with workers, etc. And I think the answer is too easy. You take Kamala Harris's name off of the policies and you take Donald Trump's name off of the policy. You list all the policies that each of them support. And when you ask Americans by a landslide, they pick the policies of Kamala Harris. When you put Kamala Harris or Donald Trump on, it goes to 50-50, which is what he won the race by. It was about a 50-50 race, 1.5% differential. So the only answer is what, again, my daughter cops to, what I cop to, and that is we still have a gender and race bias in this country. And I think absent the race and gender bias, even with all the flaws that we have with the disparity in the economy for the wealthy versus the others, I can't see any other reason.
I don't know that I agree. I agree,
and that's why I brought it up. I would like to hear your point of view.
I don't know that this particular race was race and gender. I felt like this particular race came about. I've said before, the people who supported Donald Trump believe that he will lead us through fire despite the fires he sets. And
wow.
And so, I'm pretty sure the Donald Trump folks don't like it when I say that. But
no, that's why I said wow.
That's the truth. We all know that his tweets, he sets fires, right? Like whatever you want to call them, right? Mm-hmm. But in this analogy, I'll use fire. And I think when people looked at Harris, they didn't see somebody who could lead us through. She may not set any fires, but I don't know that they saw somebody who would lead us through. And I think if you break it down to that just very basic premise, I think that's kind of where progressive missed the movement of Donald Trump, which is, I think a lot of progressives said, how can you support a guy who set so many fires?
Actually, you are so right. You are so right. And I cop to being in that regards completely missing the American folks. But you look at it from the point of view that you think people actually believe Donald Trump is going to fulfill what he said he's going to fulfill. The other question that has been asked is, do you think Donald Trump is trustworthy or will do what he said? And these same people said no. So what I'm saying, let me go back to the race gender. When I go, if they don't, let's take your possibility that they just thought Donald Trump was going to get stuff done. Let's assume that what you said there is correct. But I'm telling you that the polls say that they don't trust that he can get stuff done, but they preferred her policies. But when they find out that it's her policies, it goes from a landslide for her to parity with Donald Trump. Do you think it is so difficult to really look at that? It's hard, I know, for a lot of folks to just turn around and say this has to do with race and gender. I know that. But I so wish that people would, for once, look and say, well, you know what? A lot of those women just couldn't see themselves, specifically white women, couldn't see themselves voting in this Black Asian woman because of our innate and carnal prejudices.
Well, the one group of people that moved towards Harris from Biden were college-educated white women.
Yes, exactly.
College-educated white women. And so, when you start breaking down, but then you have, I always use the Georgia stat of Black men who voted for 10% for Donald Trump in 2020, but 23% for Donald Trump in 2024. I mean, that's more than double of Black men who switched from voting for a Democrat to a Republican. So, it begs the question to me, is that, or do you think that demographic, Black men, didn't want to vote for a Black woman?
I am glad you brought that up. And because that is a legitimate statement that you just made there.
It wasn't a statement, it was a question.
No. But what I mean, it's a legitimate point that you brought up. And I think it has to be answered honestly. And what you find is, first of all, it's not the 24% based on the stats, as people say. That transfer didn't go from 10 to 20 something percent. It was a little bit less. It was quite a bit less than that. But there was
that was specific to
Georgia. Yeah, there was a move. You're correct. There was a move. But here's the thing, brother. Black men are chauvinist, sexist, just like white men, just like Latino men. Okay. And what's interesting is I had given the Black church a hard time for the longest time because they wouldn't allow women to serve in the pulpit. They had the same sins of the white guy that they want to hit up on. And I'm like, you guys are doing the same thing that the white guy is doing. Right? You guys are sexist. You guys are. So in effect, you are right, brother.
Well, and I'm not trying to be an antagonist, but this is an honest question just because we're having an honest discussion.
And what I'm saying is you're right. And Black men are sexist, chauvinist, just like white men and Latino men.
Did those Black men who switched, that 10 or 13%, let's not quibble about the number, whatever that number is.
Right.
The Black men who switched from Biden to Trump, did they vote for Trump or against Harris?
They voted for Trump. The ones that I knew, because I have, and this is scary to say, I have some some millennials, that young Black men that I had long conversations with. And in effect, they voted for Trump because they didn't think a woman could do it, and Trump said he was going to do it. And I remember I had a Panamanian ball that we had. A couple of guys came and they told me, "Oh yeah, we voted for Trump." And I'm like, "Okay, give me the reasons why." And they went through things like how he's going to give that and X that. And I started to go through policy. And I said, "Do you understand that there are certain policies that right now supports you, student loan forgiveness, etc., that he's intent on getting rid of?" Really? Didn't know that. I didn't know that. And did you know that, by the way, your mother is going to be, your mother has a stroke. Kamala Harris wants to support policy with Medicare at home. You knew that, right? No, I didn't. And it was a different story. We have an uneducated population that don't vote on policy. Now, look, you're a rich guy. you probably, voting for Trump is a great, it's in your own interest. So
that's probably the funniest thing that you've said, that I'm a rich guy, but go ahead.
No, I made an assumption. Forgive me, my assumption is wrong, brother. Forgive me, but if my assumption is wrong. But what I'm saying, my point is that
those frames are all from IKEA, I promise you.
Okay. But you see where I'm coming from. In other words, these guys have voted against their interests. And they voted against the things Kamala said she would have gone to Congress and fought for. So that's all that I'm saying. And I'm saying that a lot of the black guys that I knew, they voted for Trump because they thought Trump was going to do what he said. And he had much better penetration on social media, much better penetration in all these areas. He was a better campaigner, period.
They did run a better campaign, and you could argue that Harris didn't have time and all these other things, but they basically took the Biden campaign and, kind of folded it over into her, which maybe was unfair to her. But I wrote in my blog in October of 23 that exactly what happened would happen, that Joe Biden would wait until after the Republican National Convention and be forced by Democrats due to his health out of the race. And I predicted that a full almost year.
Well, you were right, brother. You were right.
So I'm kind of, it's kind of proud and sad, right? That you could see it coming. And then I thought about it from a political standpoint. Well, it made the most sense to do it after the Republican National Convention and then try to win a sprint. And because Joe Biden ran and won in 2020, campaigning less than any winning president since 1880 James Garfield's front porch campaign, where James Garfield sat on as the Republican nominee in 1880, sat not 1980, 1880, sat on his front porch and said, "Oh, if you want to know what I'm going to do as president, come by and see me." So every reporter had to go to his farm in Ohio to interview him. Yeah. Right. And so you ended up with, Joe Biden, quote, had Republicans like to say the basement campaign, where he would pop his head up out of the basement or tape something down in the basement due to COVID. But he campaigned and won. And so I think the strategy the whole time, and I also wrote that there were 3 stages of the Harris campaign, which were excitement, relief, and regret. And I think Harris squandered that excitement phase, and because there was excitement about her campaign. I think anybody who doesn't admit that is not paying attention to the reality of the
I am going to have to agree with those 3 points. Excitement. What is it? Which one do you start with?
Excitement, relief, and regret.
And relief and regret. I believe in the excitement, the relief. I don't have the regret, but what I do know is that the $1.2 billion that she had was ill spent. And when you blame, it's her campaign, so she has to ultimately take the blame. But ultimately, it's a Democratic machine, that consultant-based group of folks who wouldn't know a person who live in Appalachia for, they simply didn't go into the rural areas. They seeded the rural areas. They seeded Appalachia. I would have gone into all those areas with Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign. I would have done all these things to get the people out that I know would support, and none of that was done.
Trump's a showman. One of the other, I was quoted in 2011 in Variety magazine, of all places, that the Hollywood, gossip magazine.
Yeah, I know.
That if Donald Trump ran against Barack Obama in 2012, that he would have won because of his celebrity. And, of course, he captured that celebrity in 2016 and won. And then we saw that celebrity kind of on display in the final days of the campaign, where, he went to the McDonald's drive-through, and everyone's kind of like, "Oh, he's handling the fries wrong," and everyone's like, "That's not the point, right?" Like the point is,
the point was to get him in the news, and he wasn't.
The point was to control the news cycle in a fun way, where people are like, Harris said she was going to have fun and bring joy, and Donald Trump's out here doing these funny things, right?
But let me just interrupt that for one reason, and it's this way. For all that we're talking about, it's important to understand that in 2016, Donald Trump lost by 3 million votes. In 2020, Donald Trump lost by 7-point-something million votes. And in 2024, he won by 1.5%. I don't remember. That's about a million and so, couple million votes or so. So, I mean, what we're talking about is whatever showmanship he it was worth winning 49.8% of America this time around when he went up against. And the only difference between Kamala and Hillary, where Hillary won the popular vote, is that Kamala is a Black Asian woman. And I know it touches you. And to a lot of when I speak to a lot of guys like you, it sometimes I know it irks you when I bring up race or gender in these things, but I try to isolate all the.
I think you made a really eye-opening point right there, and something I have not thought about was comparing Hillary Clinton's total votes versus Harris's, and I think, and I haven't done that, so I don't have those figures directly in front of me.
Right.
I do like to look at more, as a general rule, look at more raw votes versus percentages, because I think they tell a truer story, and I don't know what Hillary's raw votes were compared to Harris's, but I do think that's a valid point, and
I know I got to give an important number. Sorry to interrupt you, but because I didn't want to lose my trend. But as it turns out, Harris got the third highest vote total of any president. Okay, think about that. But Donald Trump made a little bit better in his 2020 campaign.
Well, that was the argument. That was the argument in 2020 as well, right?
Yeah.
Trump's like, I have the most votes of any sitting president. Well, the other guy got more votes.
No. Look, trust me. I am not disputing Donald Trump's win at all. Donald Trump won this, and you know what? The truth of the matter is, it's fine. Those people who chose Donald Trump, it is important for them to live through what Donald Trump is going to mean for this country. I am an immigrant, and I understand how the rest of the world sees America after a real election of Donald Trump. In 2016, they said, well, those Americans have this constitutional stuff. The people really did the right thing, but they have that constitutional aberration that gave this guy the presidency. The same thing that happened to Bush in 2000. We don't have an excuse now. We elected him by popular vote and electoral college this time, and the rest of the world sees it. And I know I'm listening to you, and you're an articulate person. You're a smart person. And with some of the answers or some of the statements that you make, I can see that you're not all that proud of Donald Trump, and you're a Republican.
I don't want to say that I'm not proud of him. I think that, when you were looking at Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I think I'm also on record of saying, hey, listen, it's time for both these guys to give it to the younger generation.
I agree.
And so in that regard, I've been critical of Donald Trump, but I also believe, even though throughout our history we have sometimes failed, that, our system's based upon conducting the will of the majority while protecting the rights of the minority. And, Donald Trump, had competition for the Republican nomination for president, and he won. Yeah, he won in legitimate elections, and he became the nominee. And so I supported him, and I continue to support him. Harris is one of the first nominees to never win any election to become the nominee, not a convention, not a primary, nothing.
Well, I think that's unfair. I think that's unfair. She won as the guy's vice president. So she was elected with the guy, and her job is, if he can't do it, she takes command. But
a vice president doesn't necessarily become the nominee for your party each and every time.
Exactly. But
Al Gore became the nominee. Herbert Walker Bush became the nominee. Biden did not the first term. But that's modern history. You go before, Reagan, the vice president never became president.
My brother, however, she followed the rules. The delegates, people elect delegates, and delegates elect the nominee. When the nominee dropped out, the delegates made their choice. So, I
wasn't suggesting she did anything wrong.
Yeah, right.
I just suggested that she had no competition.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you that. I must give you that, because that's what happened, right? They squashed the competition right away. All right. Before we go here, let's quickly talk a little bit about policy. Medicare for all versus standard for-profit medicine. What's your thoughts on that? Private health care.
I always think that, when you get in these elaborate policy discussions, again, there's 360 degrees of viewing an elephant, and there's parts of it that are always correct. The parts of Obamacare that I thought were very good were, you could cover your children till you're 26 or whatever, pick an age, it shouldn't be 40, but, an age where a child transitions into adulthood and maybe college, maybe whatever, where they're still covered, and then existing conditions, you shouldn't lose your coverage, so I think there are some good things that come out of all of these policy discussions. I'm not for the problem I had with Obamacare was that we sort of created another yet federal program for healthcare. And I thought, well, if we're going to revamp the whole thing, let's throw it all together and put all of our money where our mouth is, and include, and this is unpopular on my side of the aisle, but include the Veterans Administration, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever you want to do with Obamacare. And so, and put it all, if we're going to have a federal government run or influenced medical insurance, if that's what we want to call it, then let's stop spending all this money on bureaucracy on all these other administrations.
Wow, you're the first Republican that I've ever heard said that. You're saying, well, if we're going to do it, might as well do Medicare for all. That's what I think that's what I just heard.
I don't know that it's Medicare for all, because I think that there's still a place for private insurance.
Oh, no. Yeah, private insurance after a certain, here's what I think, and tell me if you could live with this. I think we should have a baseline Medicare for all Americans, healthcare as a right. And if you want supersize healthcare where they put pedals on your bed and lay, the best, you can buy private insurance.
Well, see, I think this is one of the situations, I think this is one thing that Vivek Ramaswamy articulates pretty well. And I've been pretty critical of him as well. But I do think he articulates this well, is that medical insurance is the one insurance where we pay a premium and we expect every little thing to be paid for. And then, when a big thing happens, that's when we have to dip into our pocket. Where when we buy, home insurance, for instance, hey, listen, I lost some shingles on my roof during the hurricane.
You put it on yourself, yeah.
I put it on myself. But if I lose the whole damn roof, then the insurance comes and pays for it, right? So I think there are ways that we are looking at it wrong, and can look at it differently. I do know that when you look at places that have government-run healthcare, and that is the predominant healthcare, it is not as good as our system, and they are not coming up with the innovations. And we assume that if we're going to do these government-run healthcare, that the innovations will continue to grow, continue to be successful, and they will not. And that's one of the major problems I have. For instance, and this is, from 1900 to 1950, medical knowledge doubled, and it took until about 1980 for it to double again. Today, medical knowledge, whether it's a new drug, a new procedure, a new patent, it's doubling every 73 days. And so that is happening almost exclusively in America, where you have corporations who are invested in the financial outcome of these positive medical results. And so, we can argue both sides of that coin. It's like, oh, how sick do these corporations keep us to sell us drugs to?
I'm not going to go there.
Hopefully that to me is one of the major reasons, because if you take the corporate level out of it, government is not innovative. Government does things the way it has done and will continue to do things the way it has been done for years and years. And so you need that private industry involved in medicine to keep innovations growing.
Jamie, we're kind of running out of time, but I want to ask you a question, because I based on the premise that you give, your answer would be right. But the premise that corporations are the innovative factor in healthcare, I think is easily disproven, in that most of healthcare discoveries don't occur in the private sector's lab. They don't take a stock-owned company don't take major risks unless they think that risk is going to pay off. So our college and universities who get grants from the NIH and all these other places, they generally develop the precursors to just about every drug that we have. And only when that drug seems to have viability does the corporation step in. And at that point, they give the university a few bucks and then patent the stuff. You can look that up after the show. But I mean, that is my big problem. The big problem is you and I pay for these drugs, development, their discoveries, and then the corporations take them up using the technology that we paid for as taxpayers and then say, hey, look at this great thing that we created. And we then sell it at a very high price. That's the issue that I have. If we want to talk about innovation in the private sector doesn't do a whole lot of innovating. The private sector do a lot of copying. I mean, if you take a look at, and by the way, I believe in having private sectors. I believe in the private sector, but let's look at Ramaswamy or Elon Musk. They haven't invented or created anything. They're the ones who get the monies and enrich themselves from those creations. But the creators, the innovators, those are the people who, like myself, I'm an engineer by trade. We are the ones that create things and we get a salary. And maybe we'll get a bonus, but we are the creators and the innovators. They are the capitalists. That's all they do. They move monies around. Ramaswamy and these clowns have no time to be innovating. They're running around the place talking. So, I mean, that's the one thing that I wish we would get out of our psyche, that somehow billionaires and capitalists are innovators. They're not. They move monies around, but you and I'm assuming you're not rich, super rich or in any way. You and I are the innovators in America, not these rich guys.
I'm probably just like you. I have a house and a 401k.
Okay, good. but you get what I'm saying.
My financial advisor, I don't have a financial advisor on speed dial.
My financial advisor is me. But anyhow, but here's what I'm saying, Jamie. I would like, and I think this is where Republicans and Democrats, working class, middle class Republicans and Democrats can get together and realize that both sides are being played by these billionaires, because we are the ones that innovate, but they are the ones who profit. But look, I just enjoyed speaking to you so much that time kind of caught up on me. So I'm going to ask you to tell me whatever the hell you want to tell me to close out that you want my audience to know before we close this baby down.
Hey, well, I appreciate the discussion and holding my feet to the fire on so many issues. So that was great. Thank you. And, and I appreciate the discussion. I think this is the way our country needs to move forward. I think the extremes on both sides have been a little more of the tail wagging the dog rather than when I came along, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton were passing a balanced budget, and we haven't had that in a very long time. People can follow me on Reasonable Arguments at Substack or YouTube, or at RepJam, REPJAM, on just about any other social media.
Well, I'll make sure to have all your information in the blog that will accompany this discussion. And I want to, first of all, thank you, Jamie, for coming on this platform to discuss, the things that you believe in. And I hope to have you again sometimes. We've been speaking to Jamie Miller, a seasoned political consultant and former executive director of the Republican Party of Florida. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I want to touch on something that Jack talked about, capitalism, because there are some people who complain a lot when I make commentary on capitalism as if I am un-American in saying this system has not worked for most, because again, it's a set of facades. I want to be very, very clear to all of those who email me and accuse me of being un-American. I am as red-blooded as American now as you are. This is a country where a lot of people came in and form about. Now, that doesn't, and let me also state about capitalism. I am 100% pro-democracy and 100% pro-free enterprise. Free enterprise meaning everybody has the freedom to create their own business enterprise, to make income, make profits. I am for all of that. What the lie that has been told to us since our inception is that there was some relationship between this a type of economic system called capitalism, and we, from Nancy Pelosi to everybody else, tries to equate that to freedom tries to equate that to democracy and try to equate that to being free. It is completely false. If you listen to what Jack had to say about how things work, how when capital comes in or when the industry comes in, they take advantage. All of that is true and by design, and they're doing what they're supposed to do. Milton Friedman, the second god of capitalism, pointed out that the sole purpose of the executives in corporations is to maximize shareholder value. It says nothing about environment. It says nothing about humanity. It says nothing about illness. It says nothing about healthcare. It says nothing about any of these things. So capitalism as a model the executives who execute that model must do everything to maximize shareholder value. And what are shareholders? Shareholders are the people who own pieces of any business enterprise. And that business, in other words, if I own a share, I own a piece of that business, and the executors of that business, their responsibility is to make me a profit however they need to. What that means is by design, every business defaults into a monopoly. Because if I want to maximize my business, the goal is to make sure my competition disappears, because that's how I get maximal profits. That is by design. You can go to business school and they will try to give you all kinds of fancy words to tell you the same. I have a series coming out called with Patrick Lovell talks about the billionaire and how they took $71 trillion out of our economy. What we want is, as opposed to capitalism being on the top of the tree, we want free enterprise being at the top of the tree. For people who want to execute capitalism, that can be one thread in that series, in that tree. But don't be fooled. All the income inequality and wealth disparity that we are seeing here, it's not an accident. It's by design. It's a mathematical formula that governs capitalism. And the results is everything you heard Brother Jack Van Beber articulate, and that you hear everybody who complains about our economic system says. It is nothing more. It is nothing more than antiseptic slavery, because there are a whole bunch of people, there's a small number of people who buy up pieces of companies' property who's executed by the workers, okay? And the workers themselves, whenever you hear somebody say, my money worked for me, the shareholders' money is working for them, what they mean is that they have the little peon slaves doing the jobs that earns them a profit. Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willis. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We